Well, back again. We talked about Samantha Rabin's case, the conspiracy to commit murder and all of those cases with the life sentences last week. Also, last week, I was 21 years old when Crystal Faye Todd was killed. I was in college, and when it took a while to figure out who done it. If you think back, like I have done, to where you were in 1991, one thing that was there's a lot of things that was different, but a big thing was not only was there no cell phones, but there was DNA, but we hadn't really mastered how to read DNA. You know, DNA runs through our veins, and it has been from the day man came onto the planet. But we've just recently learned how to look at it. And most people didn't even realize what DNA was about until the OJ trial. But before OJ was Ken Register. And Ralph Wilson was the solicitor then, did a great job of really making the first DNA case in South Carolina. Kenneth Register was a schoolmate, classmate, ex-boyfriend of Crystal Faye Todd. He was convicted of raping her before she was killed and after she was killed. He was convicted of murdering her, and the jury, instead of giving him the death penalty, gave him life in prison. In 1993, when he was sentenced, the law was different than it is today. On Samantha Rabin's case, on Randy Granger's case, I told you life means life. You die in prison, then they take you out. In the 90s, it was not that way. It was life means, as far as you're concerned, Mr. Inmate, you're going to be in there for the rest of your life. However, after 30 years, we're going to let you come up for parole every 2 years, and you can keep asking to get out. And believe it or not, it has been 30 years since Johnnie Kenneth Register was convicted, and this is his first parole hearing. So we were all sort of nervous about it. It dealt with the old law and what life was. But Kevin James is a cousin. They had maybe 20 family members, and Kevin came over and did a really good job of speaking. I spoke from the state's perspective. We did call former solicitor Ralph Wilson and ask him if he wanted to speak also, but I represented the state, and Bill Knowles, who was the chief agent for this particular case, was at Horry County at the time. He came in and spoke for law enforcement. And our parole board agreed with us and decided to keep Johnnie Kenneth Register in prison. Now, I told you, a lot of Crystal Faye Todd's family showed up. A lot of Crystal Faye Todd's family has passed away. Her mom, who was very involved in the case, Bonnie Faye Todd, passed away probably 7 or 8 years ago. But she had a lot of family members that was there, and it was enough to keep him in prison. So it is now 2024, excuse me. Years get away from you. Joe Biden's not the only one that can come up with a gaffe. In 2026, we will be back asking the parole board again to not to allow him to come out of prison. Actually, in the 80s, it was even worse. You got life imprisonment. Then after 30 years, you come up every year or every year and a half for a parole hearing. So we've done this over and over and over for these really, really old cases. And in that 1981 case, the defendant did end up dying in prison. But we went for about 6 or 7 years in a row to fight that. In Register's case, it'll only be every other year. So we will see this again in 2026.